High above the worn stone pews of an ancient English church, hidden among the twisting vines of a weathered archway, a face stares down, carved in stone, yet alive with leaves. His eyes, framed by curling tendrils, seem to watch you across the centuries. Who is this silent guardian, this leafy enigma peering from the shadows of history? From the hushed cloisters of medieval cathedrals to the sun-baked temples of India, this same mysterious figure appears, a man made of foliage, his mouth spouting vines, his beard woven from oak leaves. He's known as the Green Man, and his presence echoes through time, whispering secrets we've yet to fully unravel. Think of the last time you walked through an old building. Maybe you brushed your fingers against a wall, feeling the grooves of forgotten carvings. Now picture one of those carvings suddenly opening its eyes. That's the unsettling magic of the Green Man. He's not just decoration, he's a riddle etched in stone. Why does this same face appear in places thousands of miles apart, cultures that never met, yet shared this one haunting symbol? Was he a forgotten god, a warning from nature, or something even stranger? For generations, historians and mythologists have debated his meaning, but the truth remains as tangled as the ivy spiraling from his lips. This isn't just a story about a curious carving. It's a journey into the heart of a mystery that bridges continents and epochs. The Green Man doesn't just belong to the past, he's a mirror. In an age where we're grappling with our relationship to nature, his silent gaze feels almost prophetic. What if this ancient symbol holds clues not just about the beliefs of our ancestors, but about truths we're still uncovering today? Over the next while, we'll trace his leafy face through history, from pagan rituals to church sanctuaries, and piece together the puzzle of why this enigmatic figure refuses to fade. The deeper we go, the clearer it becomes. The Green Man isn't just watching us from the past, he's waiting for us to understand. The first whispers of the Green Man stretch back further than most realize, long before medieval stonemasons carved his leafy face into cathedral walls. If we peel back the layers of time, we find his origins tangled in the roots of ancient Rome. Picture this, a 2nd century mosaic unearthed in a wealthy Roman villa, its tiles forming the face of Silvanus, god of forests. His features emerge from acanthus leaves, vines curling where his hair should be. This isn't just artistry, it's a coded message. Silvanus was no minor deity. Farmers prayed to him for healthy crops. Travelers sought his protection in wild places. His foliate face wasn't mere decoration. It was a bridge between humanity and the untamed world. But here's where it gets fascinating. Dig into Celtic lands around the same time, and you'll find stone heads sprouting oak leaves from their mouths, like the one discovered near the old Roman fort of Trier. These aren't Roman copies, they're something older, wilder. Archaeologists still argue over whether these Celtic foliate heads were tribal protectors, nature spirits, or warnings. One theory suggests they symbolized the cycle of life, leaves bursting from lips, as if speech itself could give birth to forests. What's startling is how these two traditions, Roman and Celtic, begin to merge after the empire's fall. A 4th century sarcophagus in France shows a man with vines growing from his nostrils, his face half human, half vegetal. It's as if the Green Man was already evolving, absorbing meanings from every culture he touched. These early depictions share one haunting quality: they're never just decoration. Whether guarding a temple or a tomb, the Green Man seems to serve as a boundary marker between civilization and wilderness, life and death. Perhaps that's why he endured when other pagan symbols vanished. When Christianity spread across Europe, the Green Man didn't disappear. He slipped into churches, hiding in plain sight. A medieval artisan carving a leafy face in a cloister might have claimed it was just ornament, but the echoes of Silvanus and those Celtic stone heads were still there, whispering through the chisel marks. The more you study these early appearances, the clearer it becomes. The Green Man was never just one thing. he was a shapeshifter, blending beliefs until his roots became impossible to untangle. And that's exactly why he still fascinates us today. By the 12th century, something extraordinary was happening across Europe's sacred spaces. Stone carvers, tucked high on scaffolding in dimly lit cathedrals, began chiseling the green man into history with an almost obsessive fervor. Walk into any great medieval church, Notre Dame, Chartres, Canterbury, and you'll find him lurking in the shadows of capitals, peering from corbels, even grinning from roof bosses where only the keenest eyes spot him. Why this sudden explosion? The answer may lie in the very stones beneath our feet. Take Rosslyn Chapel, Scotland's crown jewel of symbolism. Hidden among its famed carvings, angels, devils, biblical scenes, the green man appears over 100 times. Some burst forth from foliage, mouths agape as if mid-scream. Others seem serene, leaves cascading like hair. One particularly haunting figure near the Lady Chapel has mushrooms sprouting from his eyes, an eerie detail that sparked theories ranging from pagan survival to coded alchemical knowledge. But Rosslyn's not unique. At Southwell Minster in England, a master carver left an entire green men choir in the chapter house, their faces framed by hawthorn and ivy, each expression subtly different, some jovial, others almost sinister. What's startling is how these carvings defy simple explanation. Officially, the church dismissed pagan motifs, yet here was the green man flourishing in its holiest spaces. Some scholars argue medieval craftsmen embedded him as a quiet act of rebellion, preserving pre-Christian traditions under Christian veneer. Others believe he represented resurrection, nature's cyclical rebirth, mirroring Christ's triumph over death. The timing supports this. Gothic architecture's rise coincided with a cultural shift toward nature as divine artistry. Those soaring cathedrals, flooded with light through stained glass, were designed to evoke Eden, and what better guardian for paradise than a man fused with creation itself? Then there's the placement. Green men rarely occupy central positions. They hide in margins, on misericords, even tucked under choir stalls, places where only those who knelt or looked up would see them. Was this intentional secrecy? At St. Mary Redcliffe in Bristol, one peers down from a dark corner near the altar, his leafy mouth open as if whispering secrets to initiates. Meanwhile, in France's Amiens Cathedral, a cluster of foliate heads encircles a window dedicated to Adam, a visual echo of humanity's lost connection to the natural world. The most compelling clue might come from the carvers themselves. Medieval masons left few written records, but their tools tell a story. Examination of chisel marks reveals something extraordinary. Green men were often among the last elements added, sometimes carved with finer tools than surrounding figures. At Lincoln Cathedral, restorers found traces of green pigment on one foliate head, proof these faces were once painted, vibrant with life. This wasn't casual decoration, it was deliberate, almost reverent work. Perhaps that's the green man's true power. He's neither fully Christian nor pagan, but something transcendent, a bridge between worlds. When you stand beneath those vaulted ceilings, surrounded by his watchful gaze, you can almost hear the rustle of leaves in the stone. The medieval faithful may not have understood why they kept carving him, only that they couldn't stop, and 7 centuries later, we're still trying to decipher the message they left growing in the shadows. To truly understand the green man's deeper roots, we must step beyond the church walls and into the misty groves of pagan Europe. Long before his face adorned cathedrals, he may have been known by another name, Cernunnos, the horned god of the Celts. Carved onto the Gundestrup cauldron around 2,000 years ago, Cernunnos sits cross-legged, antlers crowning his head, a torque in one hand and a serpent in the other. Surrounding him, a menagerie of wild creatures, stag, boar, even a human figure riding a dolphin. This isn't just mythology, it's a window into how ancient Europeans saw the divine. Cernunnos wasn't merely a god of the forest, he was its embodiment, a mediator between the untamed world and humankind. sound familiar? Now, fast forward to medieval England, where an eerie parallel emerges in Arthurian legend. The Green Knight, a towering figure with emerald skin and holly in hand, challenges Sir Gawain in a deadly game. When Gawain strikes off his head, the knight simply picks it up and rides away laughing. This supernatural being, part man, part force of nature, mirrors the Green Man's duality. Both are untouchable by death, both blur the line between human and natural realms. Scholars like Margaret Murray have argued the Green Knight is a Christianized memory of pagan vegetation, spirits, entities celebrated in rituals to ensure fertile fields and mild winters. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Pagan Europe teamed with nature spirits, the Welsh Gwyn ap Nudd, lord of the wild hunt, the Germanic Woden, who hung from Yggdrasil to gain wisdom, even the Greek Dionysus, whose followers wore ivy crowns. What unites them? They're all liminal figures existing between worlds. The Green Man fits perfectly into this tradition. His vines suggest growth, yes, but also entanglement, the way nature reclaims everything in time. This raises a provocative question. How did such a blatantly pagan symbol survive the Church's purges? The answer lies in a quiet cultural alchemy. Missionaries converting pagan populations often repurposed sacred sites and symbols, grafting Christian meaning onto older traditions. A spring once dedicated to a local water nymph might become a shrine to the Virgin Mary. A sacred oak could be recast as the Tree of Jesse. The Green Man, it seems, underwent a similar transformation. To the clergy, his foliage might symbolize Christ as the vine, or humanity's redemption through resurrection. But to parishioners whose grandparents had left offerings in forest clearings, those leafy faces may have whispered of older, deeper truths. Evidence of this duality lingers in folklore. In the Balkans, the Green George festival sees villagers weaving foliage into a young man's costume, parading him through fields to bless crops. A ritual with uncanny echoes of both pagan harvest rites and the Green Man's imagery. Meanwhile, England's Jack in the Green, a May Day figure shrouded in foliage, dances through streets once trod by Roman celebrants of Floralia. These traditions aren't mere survivals, they're testaments to how symbols evolve, carrying fragments of the past into new eras. Perhaps that's the Green Man's greatest secret. He isn't just a relic of paganism or a Christian metaphor, he's a palimpsest. Scratch the surface and layer upon layer of meaning emerges. When medieval peasants looked up at those carved faces in church, did they see a biblical allegory or the grinning visage of a hedge god their ancestors feared? Maybe both, and that ambiguity is precisely why, centuries later, we're still unraveling his mystery. The Green Man doesn't just bridge pagan and Christian worlds, he proves how thin the boundary between them truly was. The Green Man's leafy gaze isn't confined to Europe. It finds startling echoes in traditions across the globe, as if humanity's collective imagination kept whispering the same secret. Take Japan's Jorojin, the stooped, bearded god of longevity, often depicted with a scroll tied to his staff, inscribed with the lifespan of all living things. What's fascinating isn't just his association with nature's bounty, but how botanical motifs cling to him like shadows. Woodblock prints show his robes patterned with pine needles, a tree symbolic of endurance, while plum blossoms, heralds of spring, cascade around him. Like the Green Man, Jorojin embodies cyclical renewal, but with a distinctly Eastern inflection. Where Europe's foliate faces often burst with wild energy, Jorojin exudes serene harmony, his connection to plant life reflecting balance rather than conquest. Venture further south and the resemblance grows even more uncanny. In Mesoamerica, the Maya worshipped Yum Cox, the youthful maize god whose headdress sprouts lush cornstalks. Ceramic effigies show him with grains emerging from his shoulders like living jewelry, while frescoes at Calakmul depict his resurrection rising from the underworld as a sprouting plant. The parallels are impossible to ignore, a human form merging with vegetation, symbolizing life's dependence on nature's cycles, but there's a crucial difference. Where the green man often feels like a guardian, sometimes ominous, young Cox is vulnerable, his fate tied to the harvest. Broken figurines found in fields suggest farmers ritually killed these representations to release his spirit into the soil, ensuring next season's bounty. Africa adds another layer to this global tapestry. The Dogon people of Mali revere Namo, ancestral spirits often depicted with fish-like lower bodies but crowned with foliage, a striking aquatic twist on the vegetative human. Their creation myths describe Namo's blood nourishing the first plants, blurring the line between deity and fertilizer. Meanwhile, in India, stone temples house yakshas, nature spirits carved with lotus vines twining up their limbs. A 10th century panel at Khajuraho shows one such figure with tendrils spiraling from his navel like an umbilical cord connecting him to the earth. What binds these disparate figures together? It's more than just aesthetic coincidence. From Celtic groves to Japanese shrines, cultures separated by oceans and millennia arrived at the same profound metaphor: humanity rooted in and dependent upon the green world. The variations tell us as much as the similarities. Europe's green man often lurks in shadows, his wildness tinged with danger, a reflection of dense, untamed forests that both sustained and threatened medieval life. Contrast that with the Aztec Xipe-Totec, a god of renewal who wears a flayed human skin, symbolizing the corn husk that must split for new growth. Here, vegetation isn't just life-giving, it's inseparable from sacrifice. Perhaps most telling is how these symbols persist in secular contexts today. Modern eco-spirituality adopts the green man as a mascot for environmentalism, while Japan's Jurgen appears on packaging for health supplements. Even corporate logos, from herbal tea brands to recycling initiatives, subconsciously echo these ancient vegetative hybrids. It's as if the human brain is wired to see faces in foliage, to project our own image onto the natural world as both comfort and caution. This global chorus of leaf-clad figures suggests something fundamental. The green man isn't merely a relic but a recurring archetype. Whether carved on a Norman arch or woven into a Hindu temple's frieze, he represents that moment when our ancestors first grasped their paradoxical place in nature, dominant yet dependent, separate yet symbiotic. The details change, but the deeper truth remains. We've always known on some level that humanity's story is written in chlorophyll. Among the most intriguing twists in the green man's story is his shadowy kinship with another medieval enigma, the wild man. Picture a creature draped in matted fur, wielding a gnarled club, eyes blazing from beneath a crown of unkempt hair. This was Europe's wild man, a figure both feared and romanticized in tapestries and tales. At first glance, he seems the green man's opposite, one cloaked in leaves, the other in animal pelts. One sprouting foliage, the other embodying raw, bestial energy. But look closer, and their boundaries blur like mist through a forest. The overlap becomes startlingly clear in medieval manuscripts. A 13th century manuscript from Germany shows a wild man with oak leaves embroidered into his pelt, his beard morphing into ivy. Meanwhile, in the margins of the Luttrell Psalter, a green man's face peers out from a thicket of hair, his leafy tendrils indistinguishable from the wild man's shaggy locks. These hybrid depictions weren't accidents. They hint at a shared symbolic language, one where humanity's primal roots intertwined with nature's cycles. Artists played with this duality deliberately. Take the famous wild man and lady carvings at Nuremberg's St. Lawrence Church. One panel shows the hairy figure tenderly offering a flower to a noblewoman, his rough exterior contrasting with the delicate blossom. Replace his fur with foliage, and the scene could easily depict the green man, both figures acting as bridges between civilization's refinement and nature's raw power. This wasn't just artistic license, it reflected a medieval worldview where wilderness wasn't merely dangerous but sacred. The wild man's lore adds another layer. Legends described him as a nobleman cursed to roam forests, his humanity obscured by hair yet capable of profound wisdom. Sound familiar? It's not so different from the Green Knight's challenge to Gawain, where savagery and chivalry collide. Both figures served as mirrors, forcing medieval society to confront its own fragile veneer of sophistication. A fresco in Trento's Buonconsiglio castle drives this home, a procession of wild men, some leafy, some furry, circling a golden tree. The message is unmistakable: civilization's gold depends on forces it barely understands. Perhaps the most telling fusion appears in seasonal festivals. In Swiss spring rites, villagers dressed as wild men shook fruit trees to awaken them, their costumes stitched with evergreen sprigs. In England, Morris dancers draped in ivy performed similar roles. These rituals suggest a deeper truth. Whether clad in leaves or pelts, these figures channeled the same primal energy. The green man's foliage symbolized growth, the wild man's hair embodied untamed vitality. Two sides of the same coin: nature as both creator and destroyer. This duality still resonates. Modern fantasy literature brims with characters like Tolkien's Treebeard or Martin's Children of the Forest, guardians of ancient woodlands, neither fully human nor plant. Their lineage traces straight back to those medieval carvers who couldn't decide where the green man ended and the wild man began. Maybe they understood something we're still grasping, that humanity's relationship with nature defies simple categories. The deeper you dig into their shared symbolism, the clearer it becomes these weren't just superstitions. They were attempts to name the unnameable, to give form to the whispering, growing, ever-present force that surrounds us. Hidden within the cryptic manuscripts of medieval alchemists, the green man takes on an entirely new dimension, not just as a folkloric figure, but as a living emblem of the mysterious force they called viriditas, the greening power of life itself. Imagine a dimly lit workshop in 16th century Basel where Paracelsus, the maverick physician alchemist, bends over a flask of swirling liquid. On the vellum pages of his journals, between recipes for elixirs and sketches of celestial forces, tiny marginal drawings appear, faces emerging from tendrils, mouths exhaling vines. These weren't idle doodles, they were coded diagrams of a profound belief that nature pulsed with a verdant energy and the green man was its perfect cipher. To understand why alchemists fixated on this symbol, we need to grasp their obsession with transformation. Every experiment, whether turning lead into gold or distilling herbal tinctures, wasn't just chemistry, it was a spiritual act mirroring nature's cycles. Viriditas represented the raw, animating spark that turned seeds into forests and ore into gleaming metal. Hildegard of Bingen, the visionary abbess and herbalist, described it as the freshness of the living wind, a force that sustained both body and soul. For alchemists, the green man's foliage wasn't decorative. It was a literal map of this energy, his leaves tracing the pathways of growth and decay. One striking example appears in the Rosarium Philosophorum, a pivotal alchemical text. Among its intricate illustrations, a crowned figure stands with branches sprouting from his chest, his arms outstretched like a cross between a tree and a man. Surrounding him, the phases of the moon chart a cycle of dissolution and rebirth, precisely the process alchemists sought to replicate in their flasks. The message is unmistakable. The green man doesn't just symbolize life, he embodies the alchemical magnum opus itself, the transformation of base matter into perfected form. Paracelsus took this further. In his treatise De Natura Rerum, he describes a green lion devouring the sun, an allegory for purifying metals using vitriol, a substance that often formed green crystals. But the imagery cuts deeper. The lion, a solar symbol of strength, is colored green, nature's hue suggesting a fusion of celestial and earthly forces. In some manuscripts, this lion even bears the green man's face, his leafy mane merging with the beast's fur. Here, the symbol becomes a bridge between macrocosm and microcosm, echoing the alchemist's creed, as above, so below. The most tantalizing clues lie in the margins. Alchemical manuscripts overflow with grotesques, hybrid creatures blending plant, animal, and human traits. A 15th century English scroll shows a green man with roots diving into a river of quicksilver, the alchemical symbol for Mercury and the fluid mind. Another depicts him as a homunculus, a tiny artificial man grown in a flask, his body woven from herbs. These weren't fantastical distractions, they were visual shorthand for the prima materia, the primordial substance alchemists believed underpinned all creation. What makes this alchemical green man so compelling is his duality. Unlike church carvings where he's static, in these texts he's dynamic, sprouting, wilting, regrowing. In the Splendor Solis manuscript, a sequence shows him first as a seed, then a sapling, finally a towering tree man bearing fruit. This mirrors the alchemical stages: nigredo blackening, decay; albedo whitening, purification; and rubedo reddening, perfection. He's not just a symbol of life, but of the relentless process of becoming. By the Renaissance, the motif had seeped into broader esoteric thought. John Dee, Queen Elizabeth I's astrologer, sketched green men in the margins of his grimoires, linking them to the vegetative soul described by Neoplatonists, a force animating all living things. Even Isaac Newton, in his secret alchemical notebooks, drew parallels between the symbol and his studies of light's refraction through leaves. The green man had transcended folklore, he'd become a scientific metaphor. Perhaps this is why the alchemist's version feels so eerily modern. Their green man isn't just a relic of superstition, but a precursor to ecology's understanding of photosynthesis, the literal greening of the world through sunlight. When we see him peering from those stained parchments, we're witnessing something radical, an attempt to visualize life's invisible engine, the force that turns light into leaf and leaf into breath. The alchemists may not have found the philosopher's stone, but in their green man they captured something equally elusive, the shimmering boundary between matter and magic. Among the polished marble floors and geometric precision of Masonic lodges, an unexpected face peers from the shadows, the green man, his leafy visage carved into wooden panels, embroidered on tapestries, even woven into the intricate tracing boards used during rituals. His presence here is no accident. Freemasonry, with its coded symbolism and reverence for ancient wisdom, adopted this enigmatic figure as a guardian of nature's deepest secrets. But why would a fraternity built on architecture and moral allegory embrace a pagan-inspired motif? The answer lies in the layers of meaning Masons have always hidden in plain sight. Turn the pages of an 18th century Masonic manual and you'll find startling clues. The Acacia Lecture, a pivotal part of the Master Mason degree, describes a sacred sprig often depicted as a leafy branch placed atop a grave. This isn't just botany, it's a direct echo of the green man's regenerative symbolism. Some Masonic scholars argue the foliage represents the lost word, the ultimate secret of the craft said to be buried with Hiram Abiff, the legendary architect of Solomon's Temple. Here's where the threads intertwine. Abiff's story, a master builder struck down for refusing to reveal secrets, mirrors ancient vegetation myths where gods die and return, much like the green man's cyclical rebirth. The connections grow even more compelling when you examine large iconography. In the Prestonian working, an influential Masonic ritual system, the pillars of Solomon's Temple are decorated with pomegranates and lily work, motifs that in medieval art frequently framed green man carvings. More strikingly, the Chamber of Reflection, where initiates meditate before ceremonies, often features murals of skulls sprouting vines, a clear parallel to the foliate heads in Rosslyn Chapel. This isn't superficial decoration, it's visual alchemy, transforming the green man from a medieval relic into a Masonic cipher for transformation. controversial theories abound. Some researchers, like the late Masonic historian John Hamill, suggest the green man represents the unfinished ashlar, the rough stone awaiting perfection, just as nature shapes raw potential. Others, particularly in esoteric circles, claim he's a remnant of the Dionysian mysteries, secretly preserved by stonemason guilds. The most provocative link ties him to the green lion of alchemy, a symbol we've already seen associated with both the green man and the philosopher's stone. Could Masons have encoded alchemical processes within their rituals, using the foliate face as a roadmap? The proof might lie in overlooked details. At the Philadelphia Masonic Temple, a stained glass window depicts a green man surrounded by beehives, compasses, and pyramids, elements rich with Masonic meaning. Even more telling is the sprig of acacia jewel worn by past masters, sometimes crafted with tiny leaves forming a face when viewed at an angle. These subtle inclusions suggest deliberate design, not coincidence. What's undeniable is how seamlessly the green man fits into Freemasonry's tapestry. Whether as Hiram Abiff's vegetative resurrection, a symbol of moral growth, or a keeper of lost natural wisdom, he bridges the fraternity's dual loves: architecture's order and nature's chaos. Next time you see that leafy face in a lodge, remember, to Masons he's not just art, he's a living lesson whispering that even in stone, the seeds of understanding can take root. Long before the green man became a staple of fantasy literature, he lurked in the margins of medieval manuscripts, his leafy face whispering through the verses of poets who sensed his power but couldn't yet name it. Take the 14th century Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, where the titular emerald-skinned challenger rides into King Arthur's court bearing not just an axe but an entire philosophy. His greenness isn't mere decoration, it's a provocation. When Gawain chops off his head and the knight casually picks it up, grinning, the poem reveals its deeper layer, a world where nature doesn't play by human rules. Scholars like J.R.R. Tolkien, who translated the work, argued the Green Knight embodies the unmasterable wild, a force that humbles even the noblest knights. Fast forward to the Romantic era, and the Green Man sheds his medieval menace for a new role: nature's muse. William Blake's The Green Man of the Woods paints him as a prophetic figure, his voice rooted in the roaring of the trees. Blake's version isn't carved in stone, he's a living manifesto against industrialization, a scream of green in the face of smokestacks. This shift wasn't accidental. As Europe's forests fell to axes and plows, writers began recasting the green man as a wounded guardian. In The Woodlanders, Thomas Hardy describes a foliate face on a dilapidated manor, its mouth choked with ivy as if silenced by time itself, a poignant metaphor for nature's retreat. The 20th century catapulted the symbol into uncharted territory. Kingsley Amers's The Green Man reinvents him as a pub-owning, whiskey-swilling spectre haunted by erotic visions of a leafy woman. Here, the archetype becomes psychological, his vines tangling with Freudian desires and midlife crises. Amers's twist reveals the Green Man's adaptability. He's no longer just an ecological symbol, but a mirror for the human psyche. Modern fantasy amplifies this duality. Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics feature a green man as one of the endless and eternal embodiment of nature's cyclical brutality and beauty. Terry Pratchett's Discworld parodies him as the "O God of Hangovers," a hungover deity who sprouts grass when he sleeps. Even Margaret Atwood's Mad Adam trilogy reimagines him as a bioengineered gardener, splicing ancient myth with dystopian science. What unites these wildly different interpretations? The Green Man endures because he's the ultimate shapeshifter. To medieval poets, he was a test of courage. To romantics, a cry against progress. To modern writers, a vessel for everything from eco-anxiety to existential dread. His leaves aren't just foliage, they're pages, endlessly rewritten by each generation trying to decipher the oldest story of all, our tangled, thorny, beautiful kinship with the living world. Deep in the emerald heart of Sherwood Forest, where sunlight filters through ancient oaks like coins scattered on moss, a legendary figure moves silently, cloaked in Lincoln green, his bow strung with the tension of rebellion. Robin Hood's name conjures images of feathered caps and stolen gold, but peel back the layers of ballad and Hollywood gloss, and you'll find something far older lurking in his foliage. That iconic green attire wasn't just camouflage, it was a costume steeped in myth. Scholars like John Matthews have long noted the uncanny parallels between England's most famous outlaw and the Green Man, two faces of the same archetype, both rooted in the wild, both defying authority with a wink and a snarl. Consider the clues woven into the earliest Robin Hood tales. The 15th century Jest of Robin Hood describes him not just as a thief, but as a figure who knew the woods as a fox knows its den, his very body seeming to merge with the forest. In one eerie passage, a terrified monk claims the outlaw's eyes gleamed, like holly berries in the dark, a description that could have been lifted straight from a Green Man carving. Even more telling is the setting itself. Sherwood wasn't merely a hideout, it was a character, its vastness echoing the Green Man's role as guardian of untamed spaces. When Robin and his men don leaves as disguises, a recurring motif in the ballads, they're not just hiding, they're ritually becoming the forest, much like those medieval carvings of men morphing into foliage. The connections grow thornier when we examine the Green Chapel from Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. This mysterious sanctuary, described as a grassy mound where vines clutch at the stones, isn't a chapel at all, it's a liminal space where civilization frays at the edges. Sound familiar? Sherwood functioned similarly for Robin's band, a zone outside Norman law where the rules of men dissolved into the older laws of nature. Both the Green Chapel and Sherwood serve as arenas where heroes are tested not by swords, but by their relationship to the wild. Gawain faces a supernatural forest guardian, Robin becomes one. But here's where folklore throws us a curveball. While the Green Man often symbolizes cyclical rebirth, Robin Hood's stories pulse with outright revolution. His green isn't just the color of leaves, it's the hue of envy, of the disenfranchised glaring at the fat monasteries and bloated nobility. This subversion reaches its peak in the May Day celebrations where Robin features prominently. Villagers would crown a King of the May, often a Robin Hood impersonator draped in greenery, leading processions that temporarily overturned social order. Historian Ronald Hutton argues these rites channeled the same energy as Green Man carvings. Both were societal pressure valves, allowing controlled chaos to reaffirm the natural order. The most compelling evidence might lie in Robin's enduring mutability. Over centuries, he's been recast as a Saxon rebel, a dispossessed noble, even a proto-socialist, but the green cloak never fades. It's as if the color itself holds power beyond fashion. In the child ballads, when Robin is mortally wounded, he insists on being buried where his arrow falls, marking his grave with a living hawthorn. This final act, a man becoming one with the landscape, mirrors the Green Man's ultimate message, that humanity and nature aren't separate but inextricably tangled. Whether carved in cathedral stone or racing through literary ballads, the message remains the same: defy, adapt, grow. Not all green men smile benevolently from their stone perches. In the shadowy corners of certain churches, a far more unsettling version lurks: the foliate corpse, his face not just adorned with leaves, but visibly decomposing beneath them. At St. Mary's in Beverley, England, one such figure seems to scream silently, his mouth a hollow void as oak tendrils burst from his eye sockets. This isn't the vibrant guardian of growth we've come to expect. It's a stark reminder that nature's cycle includes decay as much as rebirth. This macabre twist finds eerie resonance in medieval folklore. Across Europe, stories circulated of woodwives and tree men, spirits who demanded blood for the privilege of harvesting their forests. A German tale from the Black Forest tells of a woodsman who felled an ancient oak without offering honey or milk at its roots. Days later, his body was found entwined in saplings, his beard grown inexplicably into moss. These weren't just cautionary fables, they reflected a primal understanding that nature's generosity came with teeth. The symbolism cuts deeper when you examine the carvings themselves. At Kilpeck Church in Herefordshire, a green man's tongue extends grotesquely long, morphing into vines that strangle his own face, a visual paradox of life suffocating itself. Art historian Sarah J. Biggs suggests these choking foliate heads might represent the medieval concept of Homo bulla, man as a bubble, beautiful yet fleeting. But there's another layer. During the Black Death, as graveyards overflowed, the motif took on new grim relevance. A carving in a plague chapel near Avignon shows the green man with mushrooms sprouting from his cheeks, echoing the rapid decomposition of mass burials. Nature wasn't just reclaiming, it was consuming. Modern archaeology adds a chilling footnote. In 2008, excavators at a Templar site in France uncovered a skeleton buried with oak saplings twisted around its ribs, an apparent ritual linking human remains to vegetative regrowth. Whether punishment or sacred offering, the message is clear. The green man's shadow stretches beyond metaphor into the very real intersection of death and renewal. Perhaps this duality explains why the symbol still unsettles us today. In an age of climate crisis, those foliate corpses feel less like relics and more like portents. The vines creeping over their skulls whisper a warning we're only beginning to heed, that nature's patience isn't infinite and every guardian can become an avenger if pushed too far. Every spring, as the first hawthorn blossoms unfurl across England, a peculiar procession winds through the streets, a human thicket of rustling leaves and snapping twigs, crowned by a towering figure known as the Jack in the Green. This 7-foot-tall creature, his conical frame entirely shrouded in oak and ivy, dances at the center of a riotous parade, his movements stirring the scent of crushed foliage into the May air. To modern eyes, it's a whimsical spectacle, but peel back the petals of this tradition and you'll find roots digging deep into the green man's mythology. The Jack's origins trace to 18th century London, where chimney sweeps covered in soot and desperate for coin would don foliage-covered frames and caper through the streets on May Day, collecting pennies for their performances. But their leafy disguises weren't mere costumes. The sweeps consciously echoed much older rituals, ones where villagers wrapped a chosen youth in greenery to embody the spirit of the returning spring. Paintings from the 1700s show these early Jacks with faces blackened not just by soot, but by charcoal, a deliberate nod to the green man's dual role as both life-giver and shadow dweller. This convergence of working-class pageantry and ancient symbolism becomes even clearer when we examine the timing. May Day falls precisely midway between the spring equinox and summer solstice, a date the Celts celebrated as Beltane, the festival of sacred fires and fertile earth. Cattle were driven between twin bonfires to purify them, while young couples leaped flames to ensure prosperity. At the heart of these rites stood a figure cloaked in leaves, often called the Green George in Balkan traditions or the May King in Germanic ones. His role to channel the raw, burgeoning energy of the season. Anthropologists like Sir James Fraser noted striking parallels in the Golden Bough, from Switzerland's whipping men who lashed crops with birch branches to Romania's green bride ceremonies where girls wove flower crowns. These rituals shared a common thread, the belief that donning vegetation could transfer nature's vitality to both people and land. The Jack in the Green's dance wasn't entertainment, it was sympathetic magic, his rustling leaves meant to whisper to the crops, urging them skyward. The most haunting evidence of this continuity lies in the Morris dances that accompany the Jack. Teams of dancers, their bells jangling, wave handkerchiefs like fluttering leaves, but look closer. Some wear patches of blackface, while others sport tattered coats stitched with rags. These aren't random details. The blackface mirrors the soot-stained sweeps, yes, but also recalls the green man's darker aspect, the decay that feeds new growth. The rags, fragments of an even older practice where villagers tied cloth dipped in sacred wells to trees, creating eerie, clouty groves still found in Scotland today. What's remarkable is how these traditions stubbornly persist. In Hastings, England, the annual Jack in the Green festival draws thousands, its modern revelers unaware they're reenacting something far older than Victorian pageantry. As the Jack is ritually slain at day's end, his foliage torn apart and scattered by the crowd, it's impossible not to see echoes of those medieval carvings where vines spill from screaming mouths. The symbolism collapses time. Whether in a Norman church or a 21st century street festival, the message remains. Life and death are tangled as tightly as ivy on an oak, and the green man's legacy grows evergreen. By the 1960s, as smokestacks darkened skylines and rivers choked on industrial waste, an ancient face re-emerged from the shadows, not on cathedral walls this time, but on protest banners and hand-painted signs. The Green Man, dormant for centuries, became the unlikely mascot of a planet in crisis. At the first Earth Day rally in 1970, demonstrators in New York's Bryant Park hoisted a towering effigy woven from willow branches, its face a living tapestry of sprouting wheatgrass. This wasn't just recycling medieval imagery, it was a reawakening. The same symbol that once guarded sacred spaces now stood sentinel for something even more fragile, the earth itself. Environmental artists seized on his resonance. Andy Goldsworthy's ephemeral sculptures, faces woven from autumn leaves, only to dissolve in the next rain, captured the green man's essence as both protector and transient participant in nature's cycles. Meanwhile, in Germany, Joseph Beuys planted 7,000 oaks across Kassel, each paired with a basalt stone carved with faint foliate features. His 7,000 Oaks project didn't just reference the Green Man, it resurrected him as active reforestation, blurring art and ecology. The symbol's adaptability proved key. For anti-nuclear activists, his leaves symbolized regeneration amidst atomic devastation, a silent rebuttal to Oppenheimer's Destroyer of Worlds. At the Standing Rock protests, water protectors painted his likeness on shields, merging him with indigenous reverence for natural balance. Even corporate advertisers, ironically, co-opted his image for greenwashed campaigns, though grassroots movements quickly reclaimed him. This modern revival isn't superficial nostalgia. Climate scientists note how the Green Man's dual nature, both nurturing and fierce, mirrors contemporary ecological paradoxes. Like the medieval carvings where his smile could twist into a snarl, today's environmental crises demand we see nature not just as something to protect, but as a force that will reclaim and reshape civilization if pushed too far. The vines spiraling from his mouth in those old churches, they're no longer decorative. They're a warning written in chlorophyll, one we're finally learning to read. The presence of the Green Man in Christian sacred spaces isn't just puzzling, it's a theological contradiction carved in stone. Why would an institution that spent centuries stamping out pagan worship allow this blatantly nature-bound symbol to flourish in its most hallowed buildings? The answer may lie in the very walls themselves. Look closely at the foliate heads in Norwich Cathedral or Chartres, and you'll notice something startling. They cluster near waterspouts and roof drains, their gaping mouths channeling rain. This practical function hints at a deeper truth. The Green Man wasn't merely tolerated by the church, he was strategically repurposed. One prevailing theory points to the stonemasons' guilds, whose members carried secrets across Europe like trade routes of symbolism. These artisans, often illiterate, communicated through visual codes. A green man carved above a door might signal the presence of a master craftsman's signature, while clusters of foliate heads could denote sacred geometry alignments known only to initiates. The Rosslyn Chapel carvings support this. Their green men appear in precise numerical patterns matching Fibonacci sequences, suggesting mathematical esotericism hidden in plain sight. But the church's own motivations were equally calculated. Medieval conversion strategies frequently absorbed local deities into saints or repackaged pagan festivals as Christian holidays. A 12th century bishop's diary from Burgundy describes missionaries instructing converts to carve the old forest god's face, but let the vines form a cross. This spiritual alchemy transformed threat into tool. The green man became a bridge between the pulpit and the pews, easing pagan communities into orthodoxy. The most compelling evidence comes from the carvings themselves. In Spain's monastery of San Juan de la Peña, a green man sprouts not just leaves but Eucharistic wheat, his mouth forming a chalice. At Malmesbury Abbey, another has vines growing from his ears rather than lips, a possible nod to the biblical, "He who has ears, let him hear." These adaptations reveal a church adept at psychological warfare, weaponizing symbolism to overwrite pagan memory with Christian meaning. Yet whispers of rebellion linger. Certain green men appear in subversive contexts, like the one hidden under a misericord seat in Worcester Cathedral, positioned so worshippers would unknowingly sit on his face during prayers. Was this a stonemason's silent joke or a deliberate act of resistance? The truth may be both. Like the ivy clinging to these ancient walls, the green man's roots run deeper than doctrine, reminding us that even stone can hold secrets too stubborn to be chiseled away. Scattered across the same weathered church walls where green men peer through stone foliage, another enigmatic figure crouches in plain sight, the Sheila Nogig. These crude carvings of women aggressively displaying their genitals seem at odds with medieval piety, yet they share sacred spaces with the green man in a bizarre symbolic dance. At Kilpeck Church in Herefordshire, a Sheila grins from one doorway while a leafy-faced green man leers from another, their proximity hinting at a deeper conversation between masculine and feminine forces of fertility. The contrast is striking, where the green man's power flows from his union with vegetation vines surging from his mouth, leaves framing his face. The Sheila's potency comes from raw anatomical exposure. Her exaggerated vulva isn't just shocking, it's a deliberate provocation, much like the green man's unsettling gaze. Art historian Maureen Concannon notes their shared placement near entryways and water channels, suggesting both served as apotropaic guardians, warding off evil through symbolic excess. But could they also represent complementary halves of an older cosmic duality? Folklore offers tantalizing clues. In Irish mythology, the hag goddess Cailleach governs winter's death while the green man's energy heralds spring's rebirth. Some Sheilas clutch their vulvas with both hands as if offering birth, mirroring the green man's mouth spewing vegetative life. At Rathcline Church in Ireland, a Sheila's ribs protrude like barren branches, while nearby, a green man's face swells with oak leaves, yin and yang of abundance and austerity. The Church's tolerance of both symbols reveals pragmatic assimilation. Just as the green man was recast as Adam after the fall, Sheilas were sometimes labeled Eve the Temptress, their sexuality blamed for humanity's expulsion from Eden. Yet their persistence in sacred architecture suggests neither symbol was fully tamed. The 12th century Romanesque arch at St. Michael's in Oxfordshire crams both figures into its sculpture. Sheila squatting beside a green man whose tongue unfurls like a phallic shoot, their combined imagery too potent to ignore. Modern feminists and neo-pagans see the pair as reclaimed archetypes. While the green man became an eco-icon, Sheilas now adorn necklaces as emblems of bodily autonomy. Their shared journey from medieval warnings to modern empowerment proves some symbols resist simplistic interpretation. Whether carved in confrontation or harmony, this unlikely duo continues to challenge our assumptions about nature, gender, and the sacred. Some historians brush off the green man as medieval stonemasons doodle Stone Age graffiti with no deeper meaning, but the evidence tells a different story. Take Lincoln Cathedral's famous foliate head, carved high on a pillar where only the most dedicated observer would spot it. Why would a craftsman invest hours chiseling intricate oak leaves and acorns into a face barely visible from the floor unless it held significance? The precision alone debunks the whimsy theory. Those leaves aren't random, they're botanically accurate, with species varying by region: beech in German carvings, ivy in English ones, as if the carvers were encoding local landscapes into sacred stone. Then there's the placement puzzle. At Chartres Cathedral, green men cluster around the north porch, a direction medieval cosmology associated with darkness and the pagan past. Meanwhile, at Salisbury Cathedral, they flank the baptismal font, a strategic position linking vegetative rebirth to spiritual renewal. This isn't accidental decoration, it's symbolic staging. Even more telling are the recurring compositional tricks. From Burgundy to Yorkshire, these foliate faces appear in trios echoing the Trinity, or with vines forming deliberate shapes: crosses in Christian contexts, spirals in older sites. The skeptic's biggest oversight: consistency across time. A green man carved in an 11th century French cloister shares the same twisted mouth vines as one in a 15th century English misericord. That's 400 years of artisans replicating a motif too specific to be coincidence. Recent LiDAR scans of Hereford Cathedral revealed something astonishing: foliate heads positioned along invisible ley lines, their mouths aligned to solstice light angles. Whimsy doesn't account for celestial mathematics. Perhaps the most damning evidence against the just decoration argument comes from the craftsmen themselves. The Canterbury Tales yeoman character references stonemasons' secret green prayers, while guild records from Strasbourg mention apprentices tested on carving the leafy face with true proportions. These weren't idlers scratching whatever pleased them. They were keepers of an esoteric tradition, etching messages we're still deciphering. The green man's persistence across centuries isn't proof of meaninglessness. It's the opposite: a whisper in stone too loud to ignore. Carl Jung would have recognized the green man instantly, not just as a symbol but as something far more primal. In his studies of humanity's collective unconscious, Jung identified recurring archetypes that transcend culture and time, patterns so deeply woven into our psyche that they surface in dreams, myths, and art. The green man fits seamlessly into this framework as the ultimate embodiment of the vegetation deity archetype, a figure who personifies nature's relentless cycle of growth, decay, and renewal. But Jung's theories take us beyond mere categorization. They suggest the green man isn't just a medieval curiosity. He's a mirror reflecting humanity's subconscious understanding of its own mortality and resilience. Modern Jungian analysts like Dr. Clarissa Pinkola Estes see the green man's foliage as a metaphor for the psyche's ability to regenerate after trauma. Those vines bursting from his mouth, they're not just decorative, they're symbolic of unspoken truths pushing their way into the light. In therapy sessions, patients recovering from loss often dream of forests or sprouting plants, images that echo the green man's transformative energy. This isn't coincidence. Jung believed such visions were the mind's way of processing change, using ancient symbols hardwired into our neural pathways. The life-death-rebirth cycle takes on startling clarity through this lens. Consider how the green man appears in medieval art, sometimes vibrant and laughing, other times gaunt with leaves resembling withered veins. Psychologist Dr. Anthony Stevens interprets these dual expressions as a visual representation of Jung's shadow self, the unconscious aspect of personality that contains both creative and destructive potential. A green man carved with berries plump on his tongue might symbolize fertility and abundance, while one with thorns piercing his cheeks could embody nature's punishing side. Jungians argue this duality resonates because it mirrors our own inner conflicts, the struggle between growth and self-sabotage, between nurturing and neglect. Contemporary researchers have expanded this analysis into surprising territory. Dr. Meredith Sabini's work on ecological grief links the green man archetype to modern climate anxiety. In studies, subjects shown images of foliate heads reported stronger emotional responses to deforestation statistics, suggesting the symbol taps into deep-seated fears about environmental collapse. Meanwhile, neuroscientists at Cambridge have found that the brain processes vegetative hybrid imagery, like the green man's face, in the same region that handles metaphorical thinking, implying these symbols might be cognitive shortcuts for complex ideas about interdependence. Yet the most compelling psychological reading comes from depth psychologist James Hillman, who viewed the green man as an antidote to modernity's disconnection from nature. In The Thought of the Heart, Hillman argues that the symbol's power lies in its polytheistic nature. It refuses to be pinned to a single meaning, just as nature resists human attempts to categorize or control it. A green man grinning from a church wall isn't just decoration. He's a psychological corrective, a reminder that vitality springs from embracing chaos as much as order. This perspective sheds new light on the green man's resurgence in pop culture and therapy. When a trauma survivor tattoos his likeness on their skin, or when a climate activist dons his image on a protest banner, they're not just referencing history, they're invoking an archetype that speaks to something older than cathedrals, older than myths. Jung might say the green man never really vanished. He was always there, rooted in the dark soil of the collective unconscious, waiting for the right season to sprout again. The flickering glow of a cinema screen might seem worlds away from medieval stonework, but the green man's leafy gaze has slithered seamlessly into modern storytelling's darkest corners. Consider the chilling climax of The Wicker Man, 1973, where Christopher Lee's pagan lord looms beneath a towering wicker effigy, its face unmistakably foliate, a nightmarish cousin to those church carvings. The film's horror doesn't just come from fiery sacrifice. It's the terror of confronting nature's old gods, their vines creeping back into a world that forgot them. Director Robin Hardy admitted drawing direct inspiration from Rosslyn Chapel's carvings, twisting their sacred greenery into something feral and vengeful. Fantasy adaptations weaponize his duality even more boldly. Game of Thrones transformed the green man into the three-eyed raven, an ancient being fused with weirwood roots, his skin bark, his knowledge sprawling like mycelium. George R.R. Martin's source material makes the link explicit. The children of the forest worship faces carved into trees, their sap-bloodied mouths whispering prophecies. It's no accident Bran's mentor resides in a cavern of bone-white roots. This is the green man reimagined as a living archive, his memory spanning millennia. But the most startling reinvention might be Hannibal's surreal third season, where serial killers arrange corpses into tableaux vivants of Renaissance art. One victim, suspended like a marionette, sprouts antlers and fungal growths from his ruptured skin, a grotesque homage to Cernunnos and the green man's darker heritage. Showrunner Brian Fuller called it a meditation on how beauty and decay share the same root system. Animated films soften his edges without dulling his power. Studio Ghibli's Princess Mononoke gives us the forest spirit, a deer-headed deity whose lifeblood sprouts flowers with each step until humans sever his head, triggering a tsunami of black ooze. Director Hayao Miyazaki distilled the green man's essence here, neither gentle guardian nor mindless destroyer, but a force responding to humanity's choices. Even children's TV isn't immune. Over the garden wall's enigmatic beast, his antlers tangled with dead branches, lures lost souls into an eternal autumn. The creators nodded to medieval memento mori carvings, those grinning foliate heads reminding viewers of life's fleetingness. What unites these wildly different portrayals? The green man's cinematic power lies in his adaptability. He's pagan relic and eco-prophet, monster and sage, his leaves rustling with whatever meaning the moment demands. Filmmakers strip away his stone skin to reveal the archetype's raw nerves, our fear of nature's vengeance, our longing for its wisdom, and the uneasy truth that we're never truly separate from the green world that birthed us. The shadow of the Knights Templar looms large over the Green Man's more enigmatic history, especially in places like Rosslyn Chapel, where his carved face appears alongside Templar crosses and cryptic Mason marks. But separating historical fact from feverish conspiracy requires sifting through layers of medieval whispers and modern myth-making. Start with the Templars themselves, that infamous order of warrior monks disbanded in the early 14th century. Their documented ties to the Green Man are scant, yet tantalizing breadcrumbs remain. In the ruins of Templar commanderies from London to Toma, Portugal, foliate heads sometimes lurk near doorways that once led to initiation chambers. At Temple Church in London, a weathered green man peers from the choir screen, a structure built decades after the Templars' dissolution, yet deliberately incorporating their architectural signatures. Was this a nod to lost knowledge or mere aesthetic homage? The Rosicrucians add another layer to the puzzle. When this secretive fraternity emerged in the 17th century, their manifestos brimmed with vegetative symbolism. The Fama Fraternitatis describes an invisible college of the wise, whose members wore emerald insignia depicting a man fused with a rosebush, a clear green man variant. Alchemical texts favored by Rosicrucian circles, like the Viridarium Chimicum, feature illustrations of hermaphroditic figures with vine-entwined limbs, captioned with phrases like "the green lion devours the sun." Here, the green man transcends ornamentation. He becomes a living allegory for the alchemical wedding of opposites, yet conspiracy theories often outpace evidence. Claims that Templars worshipped the Green Man as a fertility idol stem largely from 19th century occultists like Eliphas Levi, who mingled medieval fact with romantic fabrication. The infamous Baphomet depictions popularized by Levi, a goat-headed deity with vegetative traits, bear little resemblance to authentic Templar iconography. Similarly, Dan Brown-esque theories linking Rosslyn's green men to the Holy Grail rely more on imaginative leaps than archival proof, but dismissing all esoteric connections would be equally short-sighted. Freemasonic rituals, which borrowed heavily from both Templar lore and Rosicrucian thought, explicitly incorporate the Green Man in certain high-degree ceremonies. The Royal Order of Scotland's initiation rite includes a dramatic unveiling of a foliate-headed staff, accompanied by the phrase, "From decay springs life." Meanwhile, in France's Languedoc region, oral traditions speak of Les Hommes Verts, green men who supposedly guided Cathar heretics to safety through underground tunnels. Local historians note these tales emerged precisely where Templar holdouts were rumored to have fled after the order's suppression. The most credible link may lie in agricultural symbolism. Templars were prolific landowners, and their preceptories often doubled as experimental farms. Could the Green Man have represented their mastery of botany and soil science, secrets that later esoteric societies romanticized as mystical wisdom? A 14th century inventory from a former Templar estate in Provence lists a green-faced reliquary filled not with bones but with rare seeds. Whether this was pragmatism or proto-ecology, it suggests the order's relationship with nature was more nuanced than conspiracy theories allow. Today, Neo-Templar groups continue the tradition. The Ordo Supremus Militaris Templi Hierosolomatoni, one of the largest Templar revival societies, uses a green man medallion as its ecological emblem. Their Grand Master, interviewed in 2019, called it a reminder that true knighthood means defending the living world. From medieval warrior monks to modern eco-mystics, the Green Man's leaves still rustle with secrets, some imagined, some startlingly real. Every leaf, vine, and berry sprouting from the Green Man's face was chosen with purpose. Botanical codes carved in stone by artisans who knew their herbs as intimately as their chisels. Take the oak, that king of trees whose gnarled branches frame countless Green Man faces in northern Europe. To medieval eyes, oak wasn't just sturdy timber, it was sacred circuitry, believed to channel lightning strikes and therefore divine power. A 12th century herbal from St. Albans Abbey describes oak leaves as the Creator's parchment, their veins mapping secret wisdom. When you see a green man crowned with acorns at Ely Cathedral, you're not just seeing decoration, you're staring at a medieval metaphor for resilience. Celtic lore held that oak doors repelled evil spirits, and sure enough, foliate heads clutching oak boughs cluster around church entrances, as if the carvers were grafting pagan protection onto Christian thresholds. Then there's ivy, the evergreen climber that coils from green men's mouths like vegetative speech. Unlike oak's solar masculinity, ivy symbolized the dark, clinging feminine, a plant that thrived where others withered. Medieval brides carried ivy as a fertility charm, while taverns hung it over doors to signify enduring life and enduring ale. But ivy had thorns in its meaning too. The Physica of Hildegard von Bingen warns that ivy's grip could strangle the soul's light if grown untamed. This duality explains why green men with ivy-spewing mouths often appear near confessionals, nature's paradox of nurture and entanglement made stone. Hawthorn, though less common, carries the most potent folklore, sprouting from green men's ears at Malmesbury Abbey or twining through their beards at Tewkesbury. Its blossom-laden branches were medieval shorthand for both blessing and peril. Hawthorn hedges marked fairy portals in Celtic myth. Bringing its flowers indoors risked inviting death, yet its berries were stirred into love potions. A green man woven with hawthorn, like the one glaring from a boss in Glastonbury's Lady Chapel, wasn't just pretty foliage. He was a boundary marker between sacred and supernatural. The real revelation comes when these plants interact. At Rochester Cathedral, a green man's oak leaves morph into ivy mid-carving, then burst into hawthorn flowers. A vegetative alchemy echoing the medieval doctrine of signatures where plant shapes revealed their hidden virtues. Oak's strength, ivy's persistence, hawthorn's liminal magic together, they form a botanical trinity. Modern foragers might miss the clues, but to a 13th century peasant, these carvings were living encyclopedias, their leaves whispering which plants healed, which hexed, and which held the keys to worlds unseen. Festivals today don't just celebrate the green man, they invite him to step down from his stone perch and dance. At Wales's Green Man Festival, 8,000 revelers gather beneath the Brecon beacons, their faces painted with ivy and their costumes stitched with living moss. What began in 2003 as a modest folk gig has erupted into a full-throated revival of nature spirituality, where indie bands play on stages woven from willow branches, and the ceremonial burning of the green man sends flames spiraling into the night sky. But this isn't mere neo-pagan cosplay. The festival's organizers collaborate with botanists to create workshops on rewilding, blending ancient symbolism with modern ecology. One attendee, her hair braided with wildflowers, told reporters, "It's not about pretending we're medieval, it's about remembering what we've always known." Across the Atlantic, Oregon's Fairyworlds takes the archetype even further. Here, the green man isn't just a mascot, he's a participatory myth. Festival-goers craft elaborate leaf masks in green man boot camps, then parade through old-growth forests as living embodiments of the symbol. Aerialists suspended from Douglas firs perform as tree spirits, their silks dyed with chlorophyll pigments, while storytellers recount indigenous Chinook legends alongside Celtic folktales. The genius of these events lies in their refusal to treat the green man as a relic. When a child at Fairyworlds asked why the green man had ferns growing from his ears, the answer came not from a history book, but from a mycologist leading a fungal foraging walk, because that's how trees whisper to us. Europe's resurgence takes even more tactile forms. In Germany's Harz Mountains, the annual Walpurgisnacht festival features a moss-covered green man leading a procession of lantern-bearing hikers to sacred groves. Participants press sprigs of juniper into clay face stones, creating modern votives that echo Neolithic fertility idols. Meanwhile, Barcelona's Harm Vert carnival floats reinterpret the motif through surrealist lenses. One towering puppet drips with Catalan wine grapes instead of leaves, his wooden mouth rigged to drink from a fountain of local vermouth. What unites these global celebrations is their improvisational brilliance. The Green Man isn't frozen in medieval stone anymore, he's a living conversation. At Scotland's Beltane Fire Festival, performers coat their skin in biodegradable glow in the dark algae, becoming bioluminescent green men who flicker through Edinburgh's streets like walking constellations. In Japan's Shimokitazawa district, a Midori no Otoko parade blends Shinto tree spirits with Celtic motifs, their giant paper-mache heads sprouting origami cherry blossoms. Even academia is joining the revival. Oxford University's Green Man Project pairs climate scientists with stonemasons to carve new foliate heads using medieval techniques, then installs them along urban greenways as climate change witnesses. This global renaissance reveals the symbol's astonishing plasticity. A green man painted on a Brazilian favela wall during Rio's Floresta de Paz initiative carries different weight than one embroidered on a Finnish Sami shaman's drum. Yet both speak to the same urgent truth. Our relationship with nature can't be archived in history books or locked behind cathedral doors. It must be lived, reinvented, and sometimes set on fire in a Welsh field so its ashes can feed new growth. The festivals aren't just keeping the Green Man alive, they're letting him evolve, proving that the most enduring symbols aren't those preserved in amber, but those with roots deep enough to break through concrete. The debate over the Green Man's origins splits scholars into two impassioned camps: those who see him as the cultural export of a single civilization, carried across continents by trade and conquest, and those who argue his face sprouted independently in distant lands, as inevitable as spring after winter. The single-source theory gains traction when tracing the footsteps of Roman legions. Where their empire stretched, so too did the image of Silvanus, the leafy-faced forest god whose mosaics appeared in villas from Britain to Syria. Stonemasons traveling with Roman armies may have grafted this imagery onto local traditions, creating hybrid deities like the Celtic Cernunnos, whose antlers tangled with vines under Roman influence. A telling clue surfaces in the port city of Ostia, where a 2nd-century merchant's ledger lists 20 green-faced masks shipped to Gaul, their destination a temple near modern-day Lyon. Could these have been early templates for the foliate heads that later bloomed in French churches? Yet counter-evidence thrives in places the Romans never touched. The Jain temples of Rajasthan, India, boast 11th-century carvings of yakshas with lotus tendrils spiraling from their nostrils, a detail strikingly similar to English green men, yet separated by oceans and centuries. Even more compelling are the pre-Columbian effigies of the Maya maize god, his forehead sprouting cornstalks in a parallel visual language, anthropologist Dr. Elena Vandeventer's global survey of vegetative deities found 43 distinct cultures with human-plant hybrids predating confirmed contact, suggesting something deeper than cultural diffusion at work. The medieval stonemasons' guilds add another layer to the puzzle. These itinerant craftsmen carried sketchbooks called pattern books, their pages crammed with designs exchanged along pilgrimage routes. A recently discovered 15th-century pattern book in Cologne contains nearly identical foliate heads labeled for York and for Prague, proving motifs traveled with artisans. But here's the twist. Carbon dating of oak leaves in these drawings matches local species, indicating the core symbol was adapted to regional flora. This blending of universal template and local botany might explain why Spanish green men sprout grapevines while Norwegian ones bristle with pine needles. Trade routes whisper their own secrets. Venetian glass beads excavated in Norse settlements sometimes bear etched foliate faces, likely traded as amulets. Along the Silk Road, textile fragments from Samarkand show textile designs of men with wheat beards, their threads dyed with the same verdigris pigment used in European manuscripts. The most provocative find comes from a sunken Hanseatic merchant ship near Tallinn. A cargo of Rhenish stone capitals included an unfinished green man, his chisel marks matching those in a Lübeck workshop. Was he destined for a Baltic church, his leaves meant to colonize new spiritual soil? Perhaps the truth lies between the theories. Psychologist Carl Jung might argue the green man is a primordial archetype, an image hardwired into humanity's collective unconscious, emerging wherever humans grapple with their dependence on the green world. From this perspective, the Roman Silvanus, the Maya maize god, and the Celtic foliate heads aren't copies, but cousins, variations on a psychic theme as old as the first time a human saw their reflection in a rain-soaked leaf. The stonemasons and merchants didn't invent the symbol, they simply gave it new dialects, translating nature's oldest story into the stone and thread of their moment. Whether spread by chisel or born from the soil of separate cultures, the green man's persistence suggests he answers a question we've always been asking. In the glowing landscapes of the Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, the green man sheds his medieval stone skin and takes on a new digital form, the Spriggan. These eerie, bark-skinned creatures emerge from ancient trees, their bodies woven from living wood and their eyes glowing with primal energy. When players first encounter one in the wilds of Folklore, the game doesn't explain its mythology. The design alone tells the story. Twigs sprout from the Spriggan's limbs like organic armor, and vines slither around her fingers as she summons wolves to her defense. This isn't just fantasy world building, it's the green man archetype translated into interactive language. The Spriggan's aggression attacking those who harm her forest mirrors the darker medieval carvings where foliate faces snarl from church walls. But here, the metaphor becomes visceral. Players don't just observe the green man's wrath, they experience it through controller vibrations and cascading damage numbers. Digital artists push the symbol further into abstraction. Instagram hyper-surrealists like at Pascal Campion morph the green man into glitching cyber entities, his leaves pixelating into fractal patterns or dissolving into neon smoke. In one viral piece, a neon green face composed entirely of floating emoji leaves winks at the viewer, a playful jab at how ancient symbols colonize modern platforms. These iterations aren't mere aesthetic experiments, they probe how screens alter our relationship to nature. A medieval peasant touching a carved oak leaf might have felt reverence for the living tree it represented. But when we zoom in on a digital green man NFT, are we connecting with nature, or just its ghost? Meme culture inevitably hijacks the archetype with chaotic glee. A popular TikTok trend superimposes green man carvings onto reaction videos, their stony faces seeming to judge everything from bad first dates to political scandals. The joke works because it inverts the symbol's solemnity. No longer a mystical guardian, he's now the ultimate exasperated bystander. Yet even this absurdity carries weight. By turning the green man into a meme, we're unconsciously continuing the medieval tradition of repurposing his image. Those mischievous stonemasons who hid foliate faces under choir seats would have loved the irony of their work becoming a viral shrug emoji. Technology doesn't just change how we depict the green man, it reshapes why he matters. In a world where forests are logged into spreadsheet cells and climate data scrolls by in real-time feeds, his digital avatars become something medieval minds couldn't foresee, a diagnostic tool. Games like Horizon Zero Dawn feature biomechanical green men, their faces masked by LED foliage, literally screaming stats about ecosystem collapse. Meanwhile, augmented reality apps let users project ancient foliate carvings onto modern skyscrapers, overlaying the sacred onto the speculative. The most haunting evolution might be AI-generated green men. When prompted to reimagine the foliate head for the Anthropocene, Tools like Mid-Journey spit out hybrids no medieval carver could envision, faces crumbling into soil microplastics or crystal leaves blooming from silicon pores. These uncanny images force a question. If the green man traditionally symbolized humanity's bond with nature, what does he represent when nature itself is increasingly a digital construct? Perhaps his pixelated gaze is the only one sharp enough to watch us navigate that answer. After centuries of study, the green man still refuses to surrender his secrets. The most burning question remains: what exactly did he represent to those who carved him? Was he a faded memory of some forgotten pagan god, his worship forced underground but never fully erased? The sheer number of foliate heads in sacred spaces suggests more than mere decoration, perhaps a quiet act of resistance by craftsmen clinging to older traditions. Or was he instead the Church's clever appropriation, a way to baptize nature's raw power into Christian symbolism? Those vine-choked faces above baptismal fonts certainly argue for this interpretation, their vegetative curls mirroring the living water of spiritual rebirth. Then there's the most provocative theory that the green man was stonemason's inside joke, a coded signature hidden in plain sight. Guild records from Strasbourg mention apprentices learning to carve the laughing leaf face as a final test, suggesting some may have treated him as a professional badge rather than a sacred symbol. Recent discoveries only deepen the mystery. In 2021, archaeologists excavating a Welsh hill fort uncovered a sandstone block unlike any other, a green man with not just the typical foliage but mushrooms cascading from his ears and nostrils. Mycological analysis revealed the carver had depicted specific psychoactive species native to the area. Was this a shamanic reference, a nod to ancient rituals lost to time? Or proof that some green men served as herbalist mnemonics, their carved plants teaching medicinal lore to illiterate populations? Equally puzzling is the green man's glaring absence in certain medieval texts. Church inventories and bishops' registers meticulously document everything from stained glass subjects to altar cloth designs, yet foliate heads rarely rate a mention. This silence speaks volumes. Either the Church deemed them too insignificant to record, or their meaning was so widely understood it needed no explanation. The few written references we do have only add fuel to the fire. A 12th century monk's marginal note in a Lincolnshire manuscript complains of green faces grinning where saints should stand, suggesting some clergy found them unsettling at best, blasphemous at worst. Modern technology has unearthed new layers to the puzzle. LiDAR scans of Hereford Cathedral revealed previously unnoticed green men positioned along precise celestial alignments, their mouths open at angles that catch the solstice sunrise. Meanwhile, spectral imaging on a worn carving in Burgundy uncovered faded paint traces showing the leaves were originally blood red, not green. Each discovery fractures old assumptions, proving we've only scratched the surface of this enigma. The more we learn, the clearer it becomes the green man was never just one thing. He's a mirror, reflecting whatever meaning each era needs to find in his tangled vines. From the shadowy arches of medieval cathedrals to the neon glow of digital avatars, the green man's journey spans millennia, yet his message remains startlingly consistent. He began as a whisper in stone, a foliate face peering from Roman mosaics and Celtic standing stones, his vines threading through the fabric of countless cultures. Then came the centuries of transformation, where artisans chiseled his likeness into sacred spaces, alchemists encoded him in esoteric texts, and storytellers wove him into ballads of rebellion and resurrection. Today, he's been reborn as an icon of environmental urgency, his leafy gaze staring down from protest banners and festival banners alike. What explains this relentless staying power? Perhaps it's the simplicity of his design, a face half human, half plant that makes him so adaptable. Or maybe it's the duality he embodies, at once tender and terrifying, reminding us that nature nurtures just as fiercely as it reclaims. In an age of climate crisis, his symbolism feels less like folklore and more like prophecy. Those vines spilling from his mouth aren't just decorative, they're a living warning about the words we've left unspoken, the truths about our fragile relationship with the earth. But here's the real magic of the Green Man. He's never just belonged to the past. You can still trace his legacy in the unlikeliest places. Peek into the corner of an old bank building, and you might spot his leafy grin framed by Art Deco flourishes. Walk through a modern park, and his face might emerge from a community mural woven from recycled materials. He's become a cultural shapeshifter, evolving with each generation's anxieties and aspirations. So here's your challenge. Go hunting. Look for him in the wild, not just in grand cathedrals, but in the ordinary places where stone and greenery collide. That ornate doorknob crowned with acorns, the wrought iron gate with ivy-twined faces, he's there waiting. Snap a photo, share it, and join the unbroken chain of people who have found meaning in his tangled leaves. Because the Green Man endures for a reason. In a world where nature often feels abstract, measured in carbon metrics and melting ice caps, he gives the wild a face we can recognize. And maybe that's what we've always needed, not just a symbol but a mirror reflecting back the beauty and brutality of the living world we're still learning to